story of Noah is a perennial favorite and one we love to tell children. It has lots of drama with the nutty Noah, who hears God's voice and starts building a ship on dry land. It has zoological interest with the array of creatures, all of them, of course, except for those that are in the water. And it has the drama of an enormous storm, the storm of, well, many, many millennia. Today we begin a series of sermons on covenants in Scripture and what that means for us today. Today's covenant story is that of Noah, and a good story it is. But is it? It's actually kind of a difficult one. Remember, this is part of the story too. This is from Scripture. The Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great in the earth, and that every inclination of their thoughts and their hearts was evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made humankind on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out from the earth human beings that I have created, people together and animals and creeping things and the birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. Here is a God who goes against the advice of every single modern parenting book, setting one child up, Noah, as the favorite, and then letting his righteous anger fill him to a destructive fury. I know a little something about destructive waters. Greg and I and our children were in Japan when the Great Eastern Earthquake happened. One of our UCC missionaries was living in Sendai at the time, a town some 80 miles from the epicenter and about 8 miles from the coast. Still, low-lying parts of that town were devastated, and along the coast, many towns were completely destroyed. We knew of families who lost loved ones and saw the collective grief of a nation mourning the 16,000 people who died. That's close to the entire population of the Kennebunks. There is nothing charming about a flood. So for me, this story features a God whose behavior I do not like very much. I do not admire it. Still, it is in Scripture, and so we must contend with it. Why? Why is this story in the Bible, I wonder to myself? If God is, as we hold, all-powerful and all-righteous, then this kind of behavior is certainly within God's capacity and within God's right. And if that is the case, how is it that we are supposed to trust God not to destroy all humanity again when we are so perennially awful? And why do we not, at least in mainline denominations, link large-scale devastations to God's wrath anymore? Why? Well, it all begins with Noah coming out of the ark and coming to dry land. And as he does so, he performs a simple act of thanksgiving. Here is what the Scripture reads. Noah went out with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives, and every animal and every creeping thing and every bird and everything that moves on earth went out of the ark by families. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took of every clean animal and every clean bird and offered a burnt offering on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing odor, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of humankind. For the inclination of every human heart is evil from youth, but nor will I ever again destroy every living creature as I have done. As long as the earth endures seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. So you see, if God in this story acts on divine prerogative, destroying all humanity at will because God is incensed by sin, this God also, after grasping the full force of the destruction that God has wrought, repents, and in an effluence of grace makes an everlasting covenant to Noah and to his descendants, sealed in this sign of a rainbow. All this because God is so moved by the sweetness of Noah's act of thanksgiving. What is a covenant? In ancient times, it was a semi-legal arrangement between parties that could be initiated by either party and could be between parties of unequal legal or power status. What is key is that covenants were things that happened in relationships that existed already. Covenants did not begin relationships. Rather, they gave concrete expression to a set of existing relationships. In covenant, a relationship is solemnized and given something akin to a legal backing in this form of a formal ceremony. The point here is to solemnize a commitment of the parties that they already have to one another. Even so, covenants are not exactly legal documents. They start in relationship, they contain promises, often mutual, and they imply a kind of elasticity. If the terms are broken or frayed, there is a mutuality to deciding how to move forward. And this is pretty key for Noah's story because this is the book of Genesis, by the way. This is like 6-8 chapters into the Bible as a whole. And every single Bible book thereafter will tell us once again about human sin, wandering, disobedience, inattention to God, and how that one time after another will cause strained relationships with God. But God will keep renegotiating the terms of this covenant with us because God longs for relationship with us. Noah's story tells us a few things about human experience as well. The first is that God has, for forever, promised not to use the forces of nature to extract wrathful punishment on us. Nature may still have forces that are destroying, but we should not see them as God's will in action. God, rather, has promised self-restraint, reducing divine power, so that we might fully trust the divine and relate to God. The second is that this story refocuses our attention on nature in a new way, away from the terrifying large events and towards the constant and small ones. The rainbow invites us to pay attention to the God who is perennially creating and sustaining new things happening in nature. It invites us to pay attention to the small wonders that are available to us if we just pause and look. And the last thing the story tells us is that God is moved. God is moved by human gratitude. The covenant with Noah, in the sign of the rainbow, endures and reminds us of these graces. God will restrain God's mighty power for human sake. God gives us the rhythms of nature and an ordered universe as signs of God's eternal promises to us, and that sweet thanksgiving is balm for God's rightful anger at our repeated sinfulness and hard-heartedness. In the rainbow, we find a God as regular as the seasons, as tender-hearted as love can be. And that is not just a biblical message. It is a promise. It is an everlasting covenant.